So addiction for me started without me even knowing it, to be honest, because I grew up around a lot of violence and alcohol in the family home. And I grew up in a bit of a poor area. There's a lot of drink and drugs around all the time. Um, it was like a sort of thing that people would do on a weekends and that, even when we were at school in the parks and things. But I wasn't really too much into it then. We'd have a little drink and that, but it was only sort of like youngsters messing around. We weren't going into pubs. There weren't no like drugs being taken because we were addicted. It was all sort of like a social thing. And so then coming up to the ages of work age, leaving school, it used to carry on the same thing, being a social weekend thing. And then, as years went on, it become more of a frequent social thing. So there'd be, instead of going out after work just on a Friday, you'd be going out on a Thursday as well. And then you'd be going at lunchtime sometimes to the pub for a few beers, like then back to work. And I think at the time, you don't really worry too much about it because you just think you're being sociable, everyone else with you having a few beers as well. And then you're going back to work. So you don't really see it as much of a problem. But then, my mental health was quite stable then, and I was in a full-time job, and I wasn't really having too many issues that forced me towards addiction. But then I ended up getting an injury through work and ended up losing my home and my business. So I'd gone from working full-time to having my own home to just having sociable drinks to being homeless in the council office, not knowing what I'm going to do with no savings left because I'd spent that on my rent for the few months while I was out of hospital and injured. So then, I got put in a hostel, and I was back in the area where I grew up. So I bumped into a lot of people who I hadn't seen for a few years. And it was just one of them things where the social thing to do was drinking. And, while I was not working and I was homeless and I was just living in the hostel, there's a lot of other people in the hostel who just, in and out of homelessness as well and out of prison. And I just got involved in the wrong crowd pretty much. But I enjoyed the drinking. It wasn't a problem for me at this point, It was taking my mind off of things. It was escaping. Because I'd always worked up until this point, and I'd always drunk, but not in an addictive way that I thought, So I found myself, kind of not knowing what to do in life, and I felt a bit hopeless. My mental health deteriorated quite rapidly. And I just felt alone, really. I felt on my own, apart from having a drink, and that was my newfound friend, as to speak.
So when you talk about mental health, how would you describe it? What were you feeling? How was your mental health getting in the way of you living your life?
So my mental health, basically, I'd been suffering from mental health like all my life, but I had it under control when I was working and on the right medication. But like the depression and anxiety I'd always had, that was there more prominently because I wasn't busy in the days or anything, working and everything. So I really went into a downward spiral then of, I'd lost everything. I didn't see a way out. I become suicidal because it was all a new experience to me, and drink just helped me deal with all of that. And I ended up seeing various mental health workers and the mental health crisis team. And I got diagnosed with personality disorder and bipolar. And what it was they diagnosed me and put me on medication for it. But I didn't tell them to the extent my drinking was, So the drink and the medication weren't working together. So my mental health continued to spiral out of control. And, I just got worse and worse. And I was ending up in hospital from overdosing and attempts on my own life. I was in a really bad place where I just didn't feel like I was going to get any help. I couldn't see a way out. And that led me more towards the drink and drugs as well then, because that was escapism for me. So I felt like with that, I could have an escape. So I overdosed on prescription medication. It was meptazanol, which was for where I'd injured my back. But that, along with tramadol and gabapentin, I took quite a high dosage of it. And yeah, I was taken into hospital. I was in resus for a couple of hours, not looking too good. But then I came back around in the hospital, and for me, I was angry. I wasn't angry that I'd done it. I was angry that I'd been saved. I was angry at life. I was angry at everyone. And all I come around thinking was I just need a drink. And, without me realizing it, drink had just become my life, and it had overtaken everything, And, it went from being a year or so before socializing with friends and at lunchtime drinks to a year later drinking in the morning as soon as you wake up, and then just passing out at night, not even enjoying it, and just going into blackout.
So the alcohol was the only way you could deal with the pain?
Yeah, it was physical pain from my back, and also just emotional pain, because at the time I didn't really get on with my family. I didn't see my kids. So I didn't really see that I had anything left to be happy about, I just felt like I was in this hopeless spiral going down.
So that does sound really tough, really bleak. How did you get out of that? What have you found?
So within the few years of trying to get help, I continued drinking throughout every day pretty much for the next few years. And I got put in touch with some agencies, like through mental health and through the hospital, and also through where I'd been in prison a couple of times as well, not due to drinking, but due to being involved in crime because of drinking. I had probation, put me onto courses, and I started to kind of see that there was a bit of help out there, but my mental health was one of my biggest struggles. So it was hard to attend these things and attend the groups, when actually half the time I just wanted to drink and that was it. But if the group was in an afternoon, I'd already be, drunk by lunchtime, so I wouldn't be able to attend it. So it was quite an ongoing battle for a long time to actually even want to go to any of them, because, I didn't feel like I was going for me. I felt like I was going because I've been told to go to these groups, or I've been asked to go to these groups. I wasn't doing it for myself because I just thought nothing was going to work, So for me personally, the only thing that was helping me escape everything was drink.
Wow. So what happened next?
So then after a little bit more isolation, and then basically, just taking myself away from society and just being at home, drinking alone. But it didn't bother me about that at the time. I preferred it that way in the end, because I felt like all the people that said they were my friends weren't really my friends. I was getting in a lot of trouble whenever I was around people. It was getting into all sorts of trouble with the police and with the courts and just in general. And, it wasn't that it bothered me at the time, because I had no hope in life anyway. It was the fact it got in the way of my drinking. So the drink had such a powerful effect over me that all I wanted to do was just drink, and that was it. So it's easier for me to just leave all these people behind, leave everything else out on the streets, and just go home and isolate and just get my drink. And that was it. But, I did keep in touch with a couple of my key workers and that. And, at first it used to be a thing where you just lie and you manipulate them to get them off your back, because you don't want the help. And you feel like if you tell them how hopeless you feel and how lost you feel, you're just going to get them on your case more. So you don't feel comfortable telling them that, because you just want them off your case, because all you want to do is just get drunk. And it took a little while and a lot of perseverance from my key worker, keep ringing me and texting me and, you know, sending me information, even when, you know, she knew that I wasn't interested, you know. And there came a time where I literally was at home and I just literally didn't know what to do anymore. I just, like, something clicked in my head and I just looked around thinking just empty alcohol bottles of brandy, you know, bottles of wine everywhere. I was on my own. I weren't even answering the phone to anyone or answering anybody's texts or emails or anything from, you know, like my key work at this point. Anybody who would turn up at my flat, I just ignore the door. And I literally got to the point where I thought, is this it now? Is this literally going to carry on being my life? You know, it's been like this for a few years now. And yeah, I just thought, I can't even like overdose successfully. So what am I going to do here? I just felt like so alone, you know? And I just ended up texting back my key worker, just saying, you know, maybe we should start looking at some stuff again. Maybe, you know, I'm thinking about doing something about it. And even then, when she replied to me, then I ignored it at first because I thought, oh no, what have I done? I've got her back on my case. But, you know, also with the fact that my higher power, I always had faith in my life anyway. It just gotten a different way. Like I hadn't really thought about it for all these years. And I just literally prayed and it just, something happened to me. And I felt like just an experience. I was uplifted and I thought, do you know what? If I give it a go, one last go, I might be able to do something about it. You know, no matter how alone I felt, no matter how much the drink had a hold over me, I might be able to, you know. So I took on board a lot of advice from my key worker. I got involved. By this time, it was in the lockdown. So there was not a lot of face-to-face stuff on. So I learned to do a lot of the meetings and stuff over Zoom, which to me, it didn't really bother me because if anything, it was easier for me because of having such bad anxiety. I didn't have to go out and I could do it all from home, you know. So for me, it wasn't really an issue. What the issue was that a lot of the meetings you had to go to, you can't be under the influence. Whereas I was still in active addiction at this point, you know, so I just wanted a drink. So in the end, I ended up just attending meetings anyway online, but not telling them I was drinking, you know. So it was still that thing of where I'm trying to get help now, but I'm still being manipulative, you know, because I want to drink. So it's hard to get that sort of oomph to give it up when you're kind of just testing the water, because you think, well, if it doesn't work, I'll fall back on the drink. And it's just like a really bad way of like frame of mind to have. The way you're thinking is everything's revolving around the alcohol, you know, and it's just such an awful thing to try and get away from because you can't escape it when you're in addiction, you know.
It sounds like double-minded. On one hand, you want to get better. On the other hand, you want to carry on drinking. And you want to tell your key worker the truth, but then you don't want her chasing you because you don't want to have to give up the drink, you know?
Yeah, it is a vicious circle. And, you know, it's one of these things where you think, well, if in a perfect world, you could show me that I can quit the drink and get better, I'll take it. But if you can't show me it all right now, then I don't want it. It's one of them sort of things, scenarios, you know? And it's just about like, a lot of it as well is embarrassment, you know, you're ashamed. And also when you say something to someone, like a key worker, it becomes real, you know. If you admit something, it becomes real. Then you've got to deal with it, you know. So it's another like case where you think you've blocked so much out, you've hidden so much stuff, and you've ignored a lot of stuff. Now you've got to tell someone about it all. Because if you really want to get better, you've got to just go all in, you know, and you have to just say everything. And it took a good few tries for me to do that, you know, and it got to the point then where I kept like sort of dipping my feet in, testing the water, then I'd get back out again. But I didn't feel ready at them times. And I didn't know that at the time. But now I've come through recovery. I know when I look back, I just wasn't ready.
Mm.
And when I did finally, just jump in the deep end, it just felt right. It felt like I was ready to admit a lot of stuff. I was ready to talk the truth, not manipulate. There was no point in lying about anything, because if I lied about it, I'm only kidding myself, because they'd give me these extra groups or help or lessons or whatever, and it wouldn't really work for me, because if I was still, lying, then it's just going to waste my own time. But that's how I also know that I was ready, because I didn't feel like lying. So it worked out better for me in the long run, but it took a lot of attempts to get there.
Yeah. I used to think that I used to label myself as manipulative, and then I learned to see it differently, that I needed something and I didn't know how to get it in a healthy way. So I was doing what I had to get it in whatever way possible. I'm not justifying it. I'm not saying it's right, but you must have had needs that alcohol met. It was killing you and destroying you, but it was helping you in some ways as well. What are you doing now to get your needs met? Like when you're angry, when you're worried, when you're bored, how do you cope with those things now?
So obviously I went into rehab for 3 months. I went in that even still with my doubts, and kind of very anxious, because I'm going in a house full of people who I don't know, and are also all sort of, alcoholics or drug addicts. And you just automatically fear the worst and think the worst. But in there, I learned a lot about toolkits and recovery tools, and just, the acceptance of it, and that you're not alone. Because that's one thing I know that is a real big stigma in addiction. You think you're the only one. You think you're the only person who's drinking that much or taking that much, or, but I actually then learned that there's a lot of other people who are like me, and, there is hope. And you see people who have been through it and they come out the other side, and, you've got like hope sort of given to you. So it automatically then made me, when I got out, want to carry on these tools of working and basically working the program, keeping it up, and all the things I'd learned, just making sure that I still worked them. So basically there was things like journaling, there was things like if you're getting angry or you feel like you want to get out of a situation, there's a thing called a pause button. There was loads of different ways to cope with stuff, that by writing a lot of it down as well, you could look back on it. So I would have all these tools, and I wouldn't be able to think of them all in my head. But where I had my little book with me, I'd be able to look and think, right, okay, if I feel this way, what are the options for me? Like something that might not be an option right now, but that one is, going for a walk or reading, or just, going and having a bath or making some food. Sometimes it's not always the right option, but then, sometimes it will work. So having all these different toolkits would be good, but obviously there's still only so much you can do on your own. One of the hardest things is reaching out and talking to other people, because sometimes you feel like if you reach out, you're going to be a burden on that other person. Or if you're reaching out to your key worker or, one of your counselors or something, you think if you've had a bit of a bad moment, you don't want to undo all the good. So you're worried that if you tell them, you're feeling rubbish and a lot more low, you think, well, I don't want them to think that I'm failing, It's definitely about honesty. And afterwards, after doing it for a few times and reaching out, you start to just get in the habit of it as well. And don't get me wrong, I'm 6 months clean now, and I still find it hard to reach out. But I have to just force myself a little bit. Some days I still don't do it, but it's all a matter of learning, process of recovery.
That's awesome. I completely agree with you. That's what I do. I've learned so much, but learning doesn't get me anywhere. unless I do something. So these toolkit that you talk about, that's exactly like what I have to do. I have to practice and have to take action, have to do something every day, and do something every time I run into a troubling situation. I have to do something. I can't just run on autopilot or it'll be unhelpful. Can you think of a recent situation where you've had to use a tool, a specific example of some stress or anger or anxiety or boredom, and how your tool specifically helped you?
Yeah, so I went to I've been trying to get involved in recovery now to give back and try and do some voluntary work and get involved with some of the groups more face to face now that they're going back to that after the lockdown. And I had an opportunity to have an interview with CGL to look at doing some voluntary work with them. When it came to it on the day then, even though it was on Zoom, I worked myself right up beforehand because I got really anxious. And then I started being really negative to myself, thinking that, maybe I should just ignore it and not do it. Because, I'm going to fail it anyway. All these bad thoughts, I'm probably going to mess up anyway down the line, end up drinking again. And you tell yourself all this negative stuff. And instead of remembering the positives you've done so far. So in my toolkit, I had a thing called a validation diary. And I write down, I don't do it every day, but, most days I write down even just one thing that day. It could be simple as getting out of bed, having a shower, making some food, or helping someone, anything. So I'll look back and read through that validation diary, and I'll remind myself that I have done some good stuff and it's a slow process. And that tool then helped me calm down before my interview. So I didn't ignore it and then cancel it. So I've lost the opportunity. And I didn't go into it all flustered, I just made sure that I took the time beforehand to just try and go over some different tools that I had. And I tried a couple of different tools as well, but they weren't working. And that was what worked for me at that point in time,
Great. So if you met somebody who was in the middle of their addiction, they were still drinking or still using, and they were scared, what would you say to them?
I would just say to them that there's some of us that have been through it, which when you're in that first part of recovery, or wanting to go into recovery, you don't see no hope. But there are more and more people now coming through the system who are carrying on volunteering and working, who have got lived in experience, So it's people that I know helped me because they'd been through it. So I believe them because there's that whole trust and, believe in them issue. So there, and one of the other things is when you're in a detox or a rehab, or even if you're just doing groups, and you don't go to any of them, there is still people with lived in experience involved in the process the whole way along, who you can feel comfortable with and reach out to, and who have been where you are, And the other thing I'd say as well is, I know for me, a big worry was, well, what about after the group's finished? Then what? What about me then? It carries on. There is a lot of aftercare, which you don't always hear about at the start because you don't want to just have everything bombarded at you. That's why, but there's a lot of aftercare as well, which will keep you supported, so that even if you don't want to get involved in volunteering, if you just want to do your recovery, you'll still get loads of support. There's no discriminating against it, It's still massive amount of support, and it will continue to give you hope, and you won't be set no unrealistic goals or told any unrealistic stuff. It will be one day at a time, but you'll have plenty of support, and just so people know there is hope out there.
Okay, that's awesome. I agree. When somebody's been through it, they have a certain kind of confidence and authority that people who haven't been through it just can't have. And you can feel that, can't you? You can spot that. Yeah. So where would you recommend someone go? If someone is drinking or someone's using drugs and they want to stop, they want help stopping, where should they go?
So for me, myself, I first got in touch with CGL, which is Change, Grow, Live. And I was put in touch with them through my GP. So if you already know your GP and you feel comfortable going to them rather than going straight to an agency or service, go to your GP and get them to tell you what they're able to refer you to. On the other hand, you can self-refer with a lot of stuff as well. There's a lot of drug and alcohol services, depending on what area you're in, where you can self-refer, and you don't even have to go in. You know, you can have a phone call. So if you don't want to show your face or give any details or anything, and you just want to get a bit of advice or find out what you can do, then you can just get in touch. You know, there's plenty of ways to get in touch. On the other hand, if you want something where it's totally anonymous and you're not ready to sort of get involved with services and that yet, and you want to just find out a bit more from like-minded people, there's always Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, which is where they're online or face-to-face groups. They're not run by anyone in particular. The service is all service users who have been through it all. So you can go on there anonymously. You don't have to give your name or have your camera on, or if you go to a live meeting, you know, you don't have to speak or anything, but you can just listen to how other people are recovering who have been through it. It's more a service where there's no sort of key workers and counsellors and, you know, the authority figures. It's somewhere where it's just everyone has been through addiction and they all just want to get better. So you can always find some good advice there and swap some numbers, and then, you know, possibly find out other routes of recovery through other people.
Brilliant. And do people judge you or shame you? Do they make you feel bad in any of these places? Oh, your sound has just stopped, man. Just lost your sound.
Sorry. I thought, okay, you got me now? I thought that every time I was going to get a phone call off someone or I was going to go to a meeting, I was going to be judged and I would have to explain my story and justify my being there. But you don't even have to tell your story if you don't want to. You can just turn up and listen. You know, you don't have to tell anyone anything. But also when I did get the confidence then to start sharing and asking questions, no one judged. They all welcomed me with open arms to all the groups that I've done in recovery, whether it be with CGL or in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, or even working with some of the other charities like Mind and places like that, which are more mental health based. Everyone is just happy to listen to your story, and it makes you feel at ease about being honest. You don't feel like you need to lie to anyone about anything because they're just so accepting and they're so supportive, and you really fall into a group straight away where you just feel accepted and you feel like it's a little family, you know. So it's really supportive, all the agencies that I've come across so far.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. It'd be good for people to hear that. Good for people to hear that, that they aren't going to be judged. And what about if you make a mistake? What if you slip and you said that you were afraid of telling people that you were having a hard time? What do they do when you struggle, if you have a setback, for example?
So I got worried thinking that if I tell people I'm having a bit of a hard time, they might assume that I've had a drink or I'm going to drink. And even though I hadn't, I had a real big issue with, well, why are they going to believe me? But they do, because they don't expect you to come and lie, you know. And when you're having a hard time, they're just as supportive. If anything, they rally around more for you because they want you to come through. If you have had a drink and relapsed or took a drug and relapsed, you know, they still, I've seen it in the rooms where they welcome people back. And the newcomer is the most important person. And whether they're back from a relapse, whether they come out of rehab, whether they're just joining for the first time, they're all treated as important, you know. And what they want to do is, whether you're 1 year, 10 years, or 1 day clean, they want to help you, you know, get along your journey where you want to go. They don't look at it as in, well, you know, oh, well, I thought you'd mess up, or give you any bad vibes for it. They don't. They just want to be supportive and help you get back to where you was. And they won't really go into it and ask loads of questions on how or why, unless you want to tell them, you know. They'll just say, you're here now, you're back here, you've done the hardest part, getting back in the meetings, you know. So let's move forward.
Sounds great. So you really feel treated with respect.
Yeah, a lot of respect, which is actually good when you feel so worthless, you know, and hopeless. Mm-hmm. It makes you feel like there's some people out there who do care, and also it makes you have some self-belief that actually you can change. You know, you can recover, you can get better.
Yeah. So what kind of volunteering would you like to do? Who would you like to work with, or what situations would you see yourself in ideally if you could do anything in recovery?
So, I mean, for me personally, I want to work directly with service users. So, you know, helping them, whether it be just in face-to-face meetings or taking some of the meetings, or whether it be one-to-ones. I want to just give people that hope when they come through them doors that there is help. But also, on the other hand, what I'd like the sound of and what I have interest in as well is educating. So educating, you know, companies, people, whatever it be, on addiction, so then other people, you know, the stigma can hopefully be changed, that mental health or addiction is automatically making you an alkie or a druggie. You know, it's not like that. There's a lot more to it. It's very complex. So if I can pass on all the knowledge I'm learning to other people, but say it from a service user's point of view, where I've been through it, I've been through the prisons, I've been through addiction, and I've come out the other side. And for someone who thought it wasn't going to work, it's worked so far for me, one day at a time, you know. But I want to give other people the hope, and then give the other people the education. So hopefully that will help even more people in addiction, because there'll be a better understanding.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So is there anything that you would tell to some police? Say, you know, I've got this new recruit training where you get a room full of people who are about to go out there and be police, and they're green and they're brand new. They've not done anything. They've not seen anything yet. Is there anything that you'd like to tell them to help them do their jobs?
Yeah. So with the police, having had experiences with police myself, and sometimes, you know, experiences with the police cannot go too nice, because you don't want to be arrested, and when they are there to uphold the law, so sometimes you have to be arrested. But the thing is, they might see it as in someone's kicking off or going wild. That's because addiction might have a grasp over them, and they're thinking, if I get arrested, I can't go and get my next fix, or I'm not going to be able to drink for 24 hours. Or it can be the fact that they just don't want to be around people. There could be mental health issues with it, you know. But like some of the police coming into it, it's just about kind of getting that experience where they haven't lived through it, but they understand it. You know, that addiction is a cunning, powerful thing. I'm sure that most of the people I've met so far don't want to be in addiction. You know, we don't choose to pick up a drink and a drug every day, but it has that control over you, you know. And then to get that drink and drug, you're going to go out. If you can't get it, you're going to go out and do whatever you can do to get it. And that, again, is still not something that you want to do, but you have to do it because you need that next drink or drug. So obviously, the police might see it as in someone's just been a nuisance and constantly committing crime, but without them understanding and then pointing them in the right direction of the services, they can't get the help they need. If the police have an understanding a bit more from a service user's point of view, they might be able to go, well, hang on a minute, I know this guy doesn't, you know, just need locking up for the night. He needs pointing to this service, Change, Grow, Live, or Mind, or whatever. And then put in touch with someone who can assess him a bit more, maybe get a key worker out of it. And then the police they've, you know, upheld the law, done their duty, but also the guy is not come out of it just being released back into what he was in, you know. He might have a little pointer and might go and make a phone call, you know, whether it be anonymously or you know, like properly, but it's not forced, you know. So if I find that without people putting the leaflets and the numbers and stuff in front of you, you're not going to go and look for them yourself, because as soon as you get put out back into the public, you're going to get that next drink and drug again, you know. So if you have some time to sit on it in a cell, maybe you've got to sit and read it, you know, it makes you think about it, you know. So if the police understand it a bit more as well, then they can only be an extra added element of support.
So has any police ever treated you like with respect or handled you in a way that you remember being a good example?
So I've always, whenever I've been arrested and in trouble, I've always been treated fairly going into custody, and they've always had a good understanding of my mental health and the drink and drugs with the addictions. They've always treated me fairly, which has made me in return just feel at ease as well. Even though I don't want to be in there and I've been arrested, but that's because I've done something wrong, you know. But I'm not thinking about that at the time. I'm thinking I need to get out of here as soon as I can because I need a drink. But I think that the way they treat me has helped me stay calm in there, not get worked up, and then you don't start going into a rage. They've always, you know, treated me with respect, and that means a lot when you're being held somewhere where you don't want to be, you know, and just being treated like a human being, no matter how intoxicated you are or under the influence you are. You know, when you're in there, you're obviously going to get sobered up. And if they're treating you fairly, then it kind of just makes you feel a bit more like a human being than worthless, you know?
Because there's a lot of feeling of worthlessness inside us, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And if you already feel like you've got nothing to lose, and then someone starts treating you like you've got nothing to lose, you know, you're just going to get in a whole lot more trouble. And then you're going to have that frame of mind where when you do get let out, you're going straight back out and you're going to do whatever you can to get another drink or drug. So you're going around in a vicious circle.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Christy. That's really helpful. So that's awesome. So is anybody specifically any specific people that you can see have really helped you in your recovery journey? Any family members or friends?
Yeah, so my parents are back in my life now as well, since I started getting help from a bit of recovery, and that's always a good support, because I think, you know, for me, being in and out of my family's life over the years so much, I kind of just like washed my hands of it, whereas I was thinking they would be no help and support to me because they just go on at me. When actually now I've got them back in my life, and I have had for the last sort of year and a half now. Even though I've only been clean 6 months, the last year doing groups and stuff, I was still in active addiction. They still supported me. They still took me along to some of the groups. And when you're in addiction, I just thought they were being a bit of a nuisance, really, you know. Now I look back, I'm glad they persevered, you know, because I wouldn't have carried on unless it was for them helping me and supporting me. And also my key worker, CGL, for persevering with me, keep texting and calling, you know, but also the guys, Inertia, who takes the groups. If she hadn't have treated me the way she treated me every time I logged onto a Zoom meeting every week with decency and with respect and like a human being, I wouldn't have logged on to the next meeting. So the fact that they treat you well makes you want to go back, and it makes you want to get help, you know, and they give you hope that you can get better, you can recover from this. So yeah, there's some great people out there, some great services that can help. And I find that all these little things together, one thing at a time, add up, and they give you more self-esteem, give you more confidence, and where you could only see everything through a bottle or through a drug, you start to see things a lot clearer.
Wow, that's awesome. So you were very close to dying. You tried to kill yourself. Now you're thinking about how you can help other people and help other people to live. What's your wildest dream? What would you love to do if there was no limitations, if you could do absolutely anything, like in 10 years time? Have you got a dream?
Well, if I could, then I guess my sort of dream about giving back and helping is the whole thing of, like, I guess where I thought far ahead down the line of, like, you know, becoming a counsellor, helping people, maybe even, you know, being a counsellor at a rehab, running a rehab, you know, just having people there where I'm continuously surrounded by people who I feel like I can help, but I also get something back from them in return, you know. It's helping me stay clean and sober. And I thought about this, funnily enough, the other day, because it used to be that I run my business before I injured my back, because it was all about the money. You know, you got to make the most money and pay your bills. So it was just work, bills, and then you'd still enjoy yourself on the side. Now, I've never experienced it in my life where you want to just do something where it doesn't matter about the money. It doesn't matter about that. Volunteering is just fine by me, you know, because I'm not doing it for financial gain. I'm doing it for personal gain. You know, I'm doing it because this is what I want to do. I never dreamed that I would end up wanting to work in recovery until I started learning about it all in rehab. And now that I've come out of rehab, you know, the more I look into it and the more I learn, I just think this is what I want to do.
That's awesome. You imagine picking a building, like a lovely old Victorian building, and getting funding for it and setting up different rooms to do groups and for people to live in, you know, and imagine a garden in the back with maybe a stream nearby where people could sit and chill and, you know, talk and just get better. You know, wouldn't that be awesome?
People would get to know themselves as well as each other, you know, and just that tranquility that is there, you know, them being taken out of the situation they're in and given a bed to sleep in, you know, and some food, some hot food, and then just some support. I know one thing that really got me up at rehab, got me up in the mornings, is you get up, everyone says good morning to you, everyone's happy to see you, you go into the group and everyone's just automatically in a good mood, you know, and everyone's coming out of it. Someone might have a rubbish session, but the other guys in their group pick them up again, you know, and saying good night to people at the end of the night, and you're not under the influence, you're not smashed out of your head saying it, you know. It was just like you felt part of a little community straight away, and that made you feel like you want to do this, you know, you want to get better.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. That's really cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to say? I think this has been really good, man. I really appreciate you sharing.
Oh no, thank you for asking me, Casey, honestly. But yeah, no, if I can share anything else, then all I'd say is to whoever it is, just reach out, and, you know, however hard it is, if you do what I did, don't call. If you don't want to call, send a text. And that way you can text back when you want at your own pace, but you've reached out. And that's a massive thing, just that one thing, because things can get better. There is help out there, and it will continue to, you know, be aftercare and stuff.
Yeah.
And from someone that's been there, where I could not see any way out other than killing myself. Now I want to be here, you know, and I never thought I'd say that in a million years. Never.
That's awesome. You know, thank you, Christy. And how is your mental health? Do you need a lot of medicine, or what?
So I've actually got my last week next week, where I've had the last 10 weeks working with a mental health team every week. And I get signed off next week as, you know, stable on my medication. I'm in a good frame of mind. I can always go back and reach out to them if I need to, but they feel like the toolkit they've also worked on with me with mental health, like, type of things, they feel I've got a good grasp for it. I'm able to understand it and say stuff back to them, proving I understand it, that they've seen me put a lot of the tools into action already. So they're signing me off saying, yeah, you know, I've come a long way. So I'm really proud of that, actually, because knowing that how much of a dark place I was in, and I never thought I'd have good, happy feelings or anything. And right now I'm in a good place, but I don't get complacent. That's why I still do my prayers every day. I still write my journal every day, still do my meetings, you know. And what works for one person won't always work for another, but just try everything. You've got nothing to lose, you know.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so I can send you a link to some of the other stories that we put up where people have talked about their addiction and recovery. But
yeah, I've watched a lot of them.
What's that?
I've watched a lot of them already.
Oh, cool. Any of them stand out? Any of them that you particularly that you remember particularly?
Yeah, there was I can't remember the girl's name. Was it Lauren?
Lisa?
She was at home on Zoom doing it. Blonde girl.
What was she talking about? Cocaine?
Yeah, cocaine.
That's Hannah. Yeah, that's Hannah.
Hannah.
Yeah.
Her one. Really good. It was really interesting, that was, because for me, obviously being involved with drugs and drink, but drink being my main thing, it was good to hear other people's, because I do Alcoholics Anonymous, you see, so we don't really talk much about drugs.
Yeah.
So it was refreshing to hear someone else's story on addiction from that. Yeah.